Begin today the Gemara on Daf Yud Amud Aleph, about 15 or maybe 20 lines down from the top of the Amud by the two dots. The Gemara brings from the Mishnah Rav Meir's opinion about the Karbanis Chatos, which is a soir, a goat that's brought on Yom Kippur, on Rosh Chodesh, and on every Yom Tiv. So what is it mechaper for? So Rav Meir says, Kol asi'irim kaparasan shavachulo. All of the seirim are mechaper equally. What's meant equally? They're all mechaper for everything. What's everything? So we brought before the different things that need kapara regarding the tumah and then Beis Hamikdash and kachim. So there's a case where the person went into the Beis Hamikdash or he ate kachim and he has no yidi in the beginning and he has a yidi in the end. That's one case. Another case is where he has no yidiyah, not in the beginning and not in the end. Second case. And then there's also what was mentioned before regarding the soir of Rosh Chodesh, a kapara that's needed for a person that ate from the carbon when the carbon was tameh. He was tired, but the carbon is tameh. What I brought before, according to Rab Shimon, that's what the soir of Rosh Chodesh is mechaper for. So Rab Meir says, for these three things, they all are mechaper equally. The soir of Yom Kippur, of Yom Tiv, and Rosh Chodesh, they're mechaper for everything. So Rab Chama bar Rab Chanina explains, my time to Rab Meir. What's the source of what Rab Meir says, that they're all equal? Omakra, the pasuk, when it speaks about this sa'ir, this goat that's brought as a chatos and all the Yom Tovim, it could have said sa'ir, without a vav. But instead it says ve sa'ir. It says with a vav, ve sa'ir, that you bring for the chatos. And therefore we say, hukshu kol asi'irin zelazeh. We compare all the goats that are brought as a karban chatas that is written. This is in Parshas Pinchas. Parshas Pinchas, it talks about all the karbanis musaf. So we compare them all to one another. And that vav meisif alin yerishain, the vav that's written by the soir that follows what's before, add to what's before. So whatever is mechaper before is mechaper here also on what comes afterwards as well. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain exactly how this hekesh works. When you look into the Parsha and Parshas Pinchas, so it says the Karbanis of all the Yomim Tovim, it starts with Rosh Chodesh, and after Rosh Chodesh comes Pesach, and then from Pesach it says the Karbanis Musaf of all the Yomim Tovim in order. From Pesach, and then Shavuos, and then Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres. That's the Seder of the, and in all of them it says the soir of the Chatos, and it says with a Vav. Besides one, there's two of them, the Gemara is going to soon point out, it doesn't always say with a vav, but most times it says with a vav, and therefore we compare them to each other, that they all are mechaper on everything. We don't separate them, they're all mechaper on everything. Okay, but now the Gemara explains, what the Gemara at this point thinks, what was Rab Chanina saying, that kol chad v'chad mechavre gomar. The way we compare all of them to each other is, you could only learn out what is written in the Torah near the one before. That's the hekesh. So for example, Pesach, as I mentioned, that's the first one that comes after Rosh Chodesh. So Pesach you learn from Rosh Chodesh. Okay, and so if Rosh Chodesh is mechaper on a person that eats from kachim when the kachim is tameh, so Pesach as well. Now all the others that follow in Parshas Pinchas, they're after Pesach, you can't compare them directly to Rosh Chodesh, because they're not written in the Parsha right after Rosh Chodesh. So how do you learn out that what the carbon of Rosh Chodesh is mechaper for applies by them as well? Once you know this by Pesach, so now Pesach itself becomes a source to teach me for the others that follow afterwards. As I mentioned, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, so it goes on everything else afterwards. But you're not learning everything directly from Rosh Chodesh. It's only Pesach that you learn from Rosh Chodesh, and then everything else is learned from Pesach.
Everything you learn from Pesach or the next one? Each one from the one before?
Yeah, I guess you could say each one from the one before, yeah. Okay, now this is regarding what you learn from Rosh Chodesh, and the same thing would be regarding the other two things that you learn out. You learn out from Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is mechaper when there was no yidiyah in the beginning, and there was a yidiyah in the end. And then you learn out Sukkot from Yom Kippur, because Sukkot is written right near Yom Kippur. And then you also learn out Yom Kippur from Sukkot. Sukkot is a Yom Tov, which is mechaper when there was no yidiyah at all. And then from there, you learn out to the others. But the point is, you can only learn out from one that's right near it. And once you learn this one out, it then becomes a source to compare and learn out to others. That's what the Gemara thinks right now. So based on this, the Gemara says that you can't learn out this way, because V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan said the rule regarding kachim, Rashi mentioned this already before in the Masechta, Kol ha-Torah kula, in all of Torah, lemedim lamed milamed. If you have something that is not explicitly written in the Torah, but it was learned out from something else, through a hekesh, let's say, and now you want it to become a source to teach for other cases. You could learn out that way. Chutz mi kachim. However, by kachim, you can't say that. She'ein lemedim lamed milamed. If your source is something that was only learned from a hekesh, it can't become a source to be a hekesh to something else. So the question is, how do we do that here? Answers the Gemara ole kashya. But this is not a question because this is a misunderstanding of what Rav Chanina was saying. Really, kulu mikame gomri. We learn it all out from the first one. You don't have to have. You don't learn out only that one which is right near the source. Like for example, Pesach from Rosh Chodesh, and then everything else is going to have to be learned out not directly from the original source from Rosh Chodesh. No, actually, all the other cases where the Torah speaks about the Karbanos of Yom Tov, you can learn it all directly from Rosh Chodesh itself. Since it says in the Torah the term Visoir, and the next one it says Visoir, and the next one it says Visoir, so that they're all one Hemshech. So the Torah is saying they're all connected. So therefore, even the ones that are further down the line, not directly near Rosh Chodesh, since it's all connected, so you can learn it out directly from the first one, which is Rosh Chodesh. And the same with the other ones that we're learning out from Yom Kippur, or you're learning out from Sukkot, that each one is mechaper on all 3 points, as mentioned before. You learn it out directly from the source. There's no secondary limud here. So that's not a question. But the Gemara says, Rab Chanina says that the limud here is based on that extra vav that is connecting to before. There's not always a vav. Tainach called the kasabei visar. So this is explaining how for those that it says the word visar with a vav, so you learn them out. But at Seres, V'yem Kippurim, there are 2 of the Yomim Tovim where it says the Karban Chatos for the Musaf, and it doesn't say the vav. By Atzeres, which is Shavuos, and Yom Kippur, the Loiksiv Bei Visar, there it does not say with a vav, so minala. So how do we know that by that Karban Musaf as well, on Yom Kippur or on Shavuos, that it's going to be mechaper for everything that's written here in this parasha and other cases? So therefore, the Gemara has charata from this pshat, Ela Omer Rabbi Yoina. Rabbi Yoina says that there's a hekesh. Omakra, in the end of the whole Parshas Pinchas, after it says all the Yomim Tovim with the Karbanis Musaf, it concludes, Eila Tasa Lashem B'mayadechem. This is what should be brought in Yom Tov on the Yomim Tovim, Mayadechem. So it puts them all together, Mayadechem, Hukshu, Kol HaMoedim, Kulam, Zeh, Lezeh. All the Karbanis Chatas that are mentioned here by all the Yomim Tovim here in the Parsha are compared to one another. So if regarding Rosh Chodesh it's mechaper for one that eats from kachim tameh, and if Yom Kippur is mechaper for one that walked into the Beis HaMikdash where there was no Yediyah in the beginning and there was Yediyah in the end, and then by the Yomim Tovim it's mechaper when there was no Yediyah at all. So now that it says Mayadechem, we compare them all to each other, and they're all mechaper in all these 3. That's the limit. This is the hekesh of Rabbi Yoina. But the Gemara asks in this 2 dots over here is really extra. It's a continuation. The Gemara asked, but v'harish chaydish, lav mayidu. You're saying that it's the term mayadechem that teaches to compare everything, but Rosh Chodesh is not a Yom Tov. So how does it get into this hekesh of mayadechem to say that Rosh Chodesh is mechaper on everything and we compare everything to Rosh Chodesh? And says the Gemara, Ivre, no, the truth is Rosh Chodesh nami yekri mayid. Rosh Chodesh is a Yom Tov. It's called a mayid. And if mayid means mamish a Yom Tov, mayid means a time when people gather and come together. Mayid. So where do we see this? Kedama Abaye says regarding Rosh Chodesh, the Tammuz, the Hishata, the Tammuz of that year. This is talking about the year when the Meraglim went to Eretz Yisrael. So when did the Meraglim leave? They left on Chof Tes Sivan, and they came back on Ches Av. And then the night of Ches Av, which was Tisha B'Av, when they cried, that Vayivku, all people cried that they don't want to go into Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara says, Abai says, that Tammuz, the Hishata, the Rosh Chodesh Tammuz that year, Miluye Malyuhu, it was full. There was a Lamed Sivan as well. There were 2 days Rosh Chodesh. Why? Because they wanted that they should come back on Ches Av, and then the Aveda happened when they cried was that night, Tisha B'Av. Because the Chesiv, the Pasuk then says that Neicha Kara Alai Mayid, the Eibishter designated this time Lishbar Bachurai, that this will be the time when the Bachurai, which Yidden are the chosen ones, will be broken by the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, that will also happen on Tisha B'Av. So therefore, so what does Karalai Mayid mean? That the Eibishter made it, that there should be an extra day of Rosh Chodesh. That's the Mayid that the Pasuk's talking about, Mayid that is. It should be an extra day of Rosh Chodesh, so they'll come back on Chesov, and not Tesov. If they would come back Tesov, then they would be crying, then the Aveda would be the next night, which would be already Yudov. So here we see in this Pasuk that Rosh Chodesh is called a Mayid. Okay, so now Omar Rabbi Yochanan, regarding this opinion of Rav Meir says that everything is mechaper and everything. We don't divide, we don't separate between them. But Rabbi Yochanan said, but Umayde Rav Meir, there's one thing which is an exception, and here Rav Meir is Mayde that this has a special kapara, that Besoir Anasa Bifnim, the goat that the Kayin brings inside, he sprays the blood inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Shuhu Ein Mechaper Kaparasan. This goat is not mechaper for the other things that the soir that's brought outside, and Rosh Chodesh and Yom Tov is mechaper. He's not mechaper. This soir is not mechaper for any of those things, and also v'hein eina mechaper kaparasai. And Rosh Chodesh, Yom Tov, and the soir that's brought outside on Yom Kippur is not mechaper for what the soir that's brought inside is mechaper. This soir that the Kain brings inside is unique. It's mechaper for something different, as the Gemara here will now say, and it's not connected to anything else. Okay, the Gemara here brings the limud of this. Now, what is this? What are we talking about? So this is what it said in the Mishnah, that the soir that's brought inside, it's mechaper for a case of tumeh, where the person did have a yediyah in the beginning, but he didn't yet find out about it. Yediyah b'tchila with no yediyah b'saif. That case, none of the other karbanis chatas of the musafin are mechaper. It's only the soir b'fnim, which is mechaper for this avera. And the soir abba b'fnim is not mechaper for anything else. Why? Why do we single this out? Because who ene mechaper kaparason? This soir that's brought b'fnim is not mechaper for anything else. Because kapara achas mechaper ve'ene mechaper shtei kaparas. The Gemara brought already before on Daf Tes. It says in the pasuk achas bashana, or it brought it even before. I think maybe on Daf Ches. Yeah, at the end of Daf Ches it says achas bashana. So that achas bashana means only one kaparas mechaper and not other kaparas. And hey, ene mechaper kaparasai. And they, the other karbanis musaf of the year, Shchodesh, Yom Tov, and so on, are not mechaper what it is mechaper for, because there's another time the pasuk says Amakra achas bashana by the soir b'fnim. The Torah says again achas bashana that kapara zu leitei al achas bashana. This kapara that the soir that's b'fnim is mechaper for is once a year. The other karbanis musaf chatas are not mechaper for what this is mechaper for only once a year.
When is that?
What is it mechaper for?
When is that? What time of the year?
Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, the soir hanasa b'fnim. It's mechaper once a year. For which case? When there's a yediyah b'tchila and no yediyah b'saif.
Why are we choosing that case?
The Gemara before already brought the limudim. Can't go ahead and go back.
Okay,
The Gemara before brought the limud. Why? What's the reason, Taka? Why dafka that one is singled out? I don't know. The Gemara brings a braise. Tanya nami hachi. What it says here, we learned also on a braise that al she'ein ba yediyah lebetchila v'le b'saif. On the case where a person walking to the Beis Hamikdash tamei and he's not aware at all. And a second case, he didn't remember in the beginning anything, and later he finds out in the end. That's a case that both of these cases you can't bring a carbon chatas for this. And the third case, a person that's tired that eats from the kachon while it's talmei. So on this is what Rav Meir says: these karbanis chatas of the musaf of Rosh Chodesh, Yom Tov, and Yom Kippur. Mechaprin. It's mechaper on these three cases. Divrei Rav Meir, this is Rav Meir's opinion. Okay, that's what the Brisa says. So the Gemara says, you see here clearly that ilu, soir anasa b'fnim, but the goat that's brought inside, shaire, that Rav Meir doesn't include and say that it's also mechaper for everything. And the kaparasa nami shaire. And what it is mechaper for, this soir, which is mechaper for when there's a yediyah in the beginning, but no yediyah in the end, that's not mentioned here, that the other karbanis are mechaper. Only it is mechaper for this once a year. Okay, and now another opinion, going back to the Mishnah, this is what I mentioned before, on Daf Test this opinion, but the Gemara now brings what it says in the continuation of the Mishnah, brings Rav Shimon's opinion again, that Rav Shimon said, no, we don't say like Rav Meir, that all the karbanis, musaf, the goat of Rosh Chodesh, Yom Tov, and Yom Kippur, they're all mechaper and all these three things mentioned here. We compare them all to each other. No, Rav Shimon says, Sira Rosh Chodashim, the Rosh Chodesh is mechaper and al tar shachal asatame. On a person that's tired that eats from the kachon when he's tameh. And then the soir that's brought in Yom Kippur, bachotz, the musaf, bachotz, that's mechaper in a case where there was no Yediyah B'tchila, and Yediyah B'seif. And all Yomim Tovim are only mechaper in a case where there was no awareness at all. So each one is mechaper only on one scenario of this tumah. But now we don't compare them all to each other. Okay, so the Gemara explains the source of Rab Shim's opinion, why he disagrees with Rab Meir. So now it's understood the Rosh Chadashim lemechaper yad regolim, that the chatos, the carbon chatas of Rish Chodesh is not mechaper additionally for what the chatas of the Yomim Tovim is mechaper, because the Makra, the pasuk says, and the Gemara already brought this on Daf Tes, it says Ovain. By the one of the psukim that it says about the carbon of Rish Chodesh, it uses the term Ovain. This is actually, as mentioned on Daf Tes, regarding the conversation that Moshe Rabbeinu has with Aaron on the carbon Rish Chodesh that's brought on Yom Hashmini Lamiluim. And there it says in the pasuk, "Va'isa nasan lechem, loses es avayna eda lechaper aleim." So it says ovain. It says a singular term, ovain echadu naisa. The carbon chatas of Rish Chodesh is mechaper for one aveda, veina naisa shnei aveinis. It's not mechaper for two, and therefore it's not going to be mechaper for anything else for what Yom Tov is mechaper and so on. Elo dirigolim nechapra derash chadashim. The reverse, why wouldn't I say that the carbon chatas of Yom Tov, I should compare like Rav Meir compared, that it's mechaper also for what Rish Chodesh is mechaper. And that is on a person that's tired, that eats from something which is tamei, a kachon that's tamei. So what it says here as well, the Makra, the pasuk says, Oisa. By that same pasuk, by Rish Chodesh, it says, Va'oisa nasan lachem lasa, which means Oisa, Noisa oven, Vein acher Noisa oven. This carbon of Rish Chodesh is mechaper for this aveda, the tar that eats from tamei, but no other carbon. The yontif is not mechaper for this. Further, the Gemara says, now the third thing, which is regarding the sar that's bachutz on Yom Kippur, it's understood that on yontif, it's not mechaper for what the chatas of Yom Kippur is mechaper, because the Makra achas bashana. As mentioned before, it says achas bashana, that only once a year on Yom Kippur you have this kapara, not on every Yom Tiv, and that's kapara zuletei al achas bashana. Elo, but however, in the reverse, the Yom Kippurim, the soy that's brought bachutz on Yom Kippur, the chapra deregolim, why wouldn't it be mechaper for what the karbanis chatas of Yom Tiv is mechaper for? So the Gemara says over here as well, as mentioned before, it says another time achas bashana. Omakro achas, it says again achas. Kapara achas mechaper, ve'ena mechaper shtei kaparis. The carbon of the soil that's brought by chutz on Yom Kippur is only mechaper on one aveda and not two. So we have twice achas. One teaches me that the kapara of this soil is not under any other karbanis of Yom Tiv. And one teaches me the reverse, that also Yom Kippur is not mechaper what all the Yom Tovim are mechaper for. It's only mechaper on one thing. Okay, but now the Gemara asks on this limud regarding the two times achas. And what are we using it for over here? We're using it regarding that sar that's brought in Yom Kippur bachutz. But the question is, what v'hai achas? When it says in the Torah the word achas, this pasuk achas bashana is written in the Torah regarding the soil that the Kayyim brings inside the Beis and inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's not even written regarding the soil nasa b'chutz that we're talking about. This is the Gemara. True, it's not, but there's a hekish. Makro, regarding the soil that's brought outside, the pasuk says muvad chatas hakipurim, that this soil that's brought as a musaf and Yom Kippur outside is besides the other goat that's brought inside, and therefore the iskish chitzon lepnivi. I compare this side that's brought outside to the side that's brought inside. Just like the one that's inside, it says twice achas to teach me that it's only mechaper on one thing and nothing else is mechaper what it is mechaper for. I say the same thing for the sar hanase bachutz. Okay, now the Gemara goes on to the Mishnah that brings another version of Rab Shim's opinion. Rab Shimon ben Yehuda Rab Shimon ben Yehuda said in the name of Rab Shimon that it works differently. So what it says in the Mishnah is that according to Rab Shimon, Rish Chodesh is mechaper only on one thing, on a tar that eats from Tomei, from kachim that's Tomei. Then you go to a Yom Tiv, the karbanis chatas of this musaf on Yom Tiv is not mechaper actually on what Rish Chodesh is mechaper, and you add also that it's mechaper on a person that walked into the Beis HaMikdash Tomei with no awareness at all, no yediyah b'tchila, no yediyah b'seif. And then you go back to the sar that's brought b'chutz Yom Kippur, it's mechaper on those two, and it actually adds a third. In a case where the person did not have the Yediyah B'tchila and had the Yediyah B'seif, it's mechaper for that as well. That's how it works. So Yom Kippur is mechaper on 3, Yom Tov is mechaper on 2, and Rosh Chodesh is mechaper on 1. Okay, so let's see the source of this opinion. So the Gemara, how do we explain this? The difference here. Ma'ishno, what's the difference that the Rosh Chodashim delay mechaper ad regalim regarding Rosh Chodesh? It's only mechaper on one thing. It's not mechaper on what you find by Yomim Tovim. As to the pasuk we mentioned before, the Amakra Avain. By Rosh Chodesh it says the singular term of Avain. Avain echadu noise ve'einu noise shnei avainis. It's not mechaper on two things. If so, the regalim nami le mechaper ad Rosh Chodashim. So Yom Tov should not be mechaper for what Rosh Chodesh is mechaper for. So the same we also brought a pasuk in that same pasuk, the Amakra Oisa. By Rosh Chodesh it says Oisa, which means Oisa hu noise Avain ve'enacha noise Avain. That only Rosh Chodesh is mechaper for this Aveda, but there's no other karbanos that are mechaper for this. So that teaches that Yom Tov should not be mechaper for what Rosh Chodesh is mechaper for. So why does Rab Shimon ben Yehuda say, according to Rab Shimon, that when you go back to Yom Tov is mechaper for what Rosh Chodesh is mechaper, and you add something else? Answers the Gemara, Oisa loy mashmalei. Rab Shimon ben Yehuda holds that this Oisa is not an extra word. It's not a drasha that you darshan that only this and not anything else. This is the way the Torah writes. There's no drasha here. Okay. So now going to the other case that it said regarding Yom Tov and Yom Kippur. So what did we say? Yom Kippur is mechaper actually for all three, and Yom Tov is not mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. So the question is why? Why is it that when it comes to the Yomim Tovim, so it's not mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper for, right? Yom Kippur is mechaper for a case where a person did not have the Yediyah B'tchila and only B'seif. Yom Tov is not mechaper for that. Why? Because the Amakra, because there's one time in the pasuk where it says Achas Bashana, and what do we learn from Achas Bashana? Kapara zu loy tehei ela Achas Bashana. That this kapara should be only one time a year. That it's mechaper only on Yom Kippur, and Yom Tov is not going to be mechaper for that. But if so, there's a second time it says in the pasuk Achas Bashana. So we should also say that the Yoyim HaKippurim Nami loy nechapru ad regalim. That Yom Kippur should not be mechaper for what Yom Tov is mechaper for. How can we say that Yom Kippur is mechaper for three things? Also for what Yom Tov is mechaper, and also Rosh Chodesh. How does that go on Yom Kippur as well? Achas ksiv, kapara achas mechaper, ve'ena mechaper shtei kaparis. It's only mechaper one kapara, and it's not mechaper anything else. Okay, so the Gemara first thinks to say that according to Rab Shimon ben Yehuda, we have to say that achas loy mashmalei. He holds that this whole drasha of achas that we're saying that Yom Kippur is mechaper only once, and nothing else is mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. He doesn't hold of this drasha of achas. Now, why not? Why doesn't he hold of this drasha of achas? Because so based on what the Gemara says before, we understand. Amai, the reason is because the chiksiv achas, when the Torah says about Yom Kippur that it's only mechaper on one thing and nothing else is mechaper like it, b'soyer nasa b'fnim ksiv. As the Gemara pointed out before, that word achas says actually regarding the soyer that's brought inside. Okay, so if he doesn't hold of the achas, so then why not? Because that achas is written by the soyer nasa b'fnim, and we're talking about the soyer nasa b'chutz. So that explains why we can't learn out from this achas to say that Yom Kippur should not be mechaper for the other things that Yom Tov and Rosh Chodesh is mechaper for. Yom Kippur can be mechaper for three things. But the Gemara asks, but if that's the case, then the reverse should also be true. That if so, Yom Tov should so the Yom Tov should also not be mechaper. I think that's what the Gemara is saying, right? What? The regalim nami. The regalim. Yeah, sorry, correct. Okay, let me explain this. If so, the regalim nami nechaper the Yom Kippurim. If so, we should say that Yom Tov should be mechaper on what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. Why? Because we don't darshan achas. If you darshan achas, then whatever Yom Kippur is mechaper for, Yom Tovim is not mechaper. But if you don't darshan achas, so Yom Tov should also be mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper. And the reason is like we explained before, the chiksiv achas b'soyer nas b'fnim ksiv. That word achas is not applicable here. That word achas is going in the side anasa b'fnim, but as far as the side anasa b'chutz is concerned, and as far as the seirim of the other Yomim Tovim is concerned, we could say that Yom Kippur is mechapa for more than one thing, and we could also say that Yom Tov is mechapa for more than one thing. So what is the explanation for the opinion of Shimon ben Yehuda that says that it only works one way? When it comes to Yom Kippur could be mechapa for everything. That's we're talking about the Sora Nasa B'chutz. And when it comes to Yom Tovim, Yom Tov cannot be mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. Why not? Okay, so the Gemara explains, Lo'olam achas mashmalei. Really, Rab Shimon ben Yehuda holds that the achas, although it's written by the Soyer Hanasa B'fnim, we could apply it halfway, as the Gemara will explain here now. Halfway, we could apply it to what we're talking about over here, which is the Soyer Hanasa B'chutz. Because of the hekish, the Gemara said before, mulvat chatas akipurim, that we compare the two. Okay, so therefore, when it comes over here to comparing regarding the halacha that Yom Tiv cannot be mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper for that we do say this hekish, and therefore the achas will teach that on Yom Tiv you can't be mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. Okay, let's just take a look for a second in the actual pasuk, so you'll see what the Gemara is trying to say over here. It says in the Torah twice achas by the Soyer Hanasa B'fnim. Right? So what does it say? So here and over here they have it in Ois Beis. It brings the pasuk v'chiper aren al karnoisav achas bashana. So that's one time it says that he sprays the blood on the corners of the inside mizbeach once a year. And then it says again, midam chatas akipurim achas bashana yichaper ol darisechem. That from this dam chatas akipurim once a year. So it says twice achas bashana in the pasuk. The first time it says achas bashana is teaching that the kapara of Yom Kippur is mechaper only on one thing, not on anything else. The second time it says midam chatas akipurim achas bashana is coming to teach that no other time other than Yom Kippur is mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. So now the Gemara here is making a distinction. This pasuk that I just read is talking about what? About the Soyer Hanasa B'fnim. Now, do I make a hekesh from these two times that it says achas in this pasuk to the Soyer Hanasa B'chutz? So the Gemara now is going to explain that it depends. For the first time it says achas, you do not make a hekesh. But for the second time it says achas, you do make a hekesh. Now why is that? So let's see in the words of the Gemara. The Shani Hacha, so over here, regarding the first time it says achas bashana in the pasuk, there's no hekesh from the Soyer Hanasa B'fnim to the Soyer Hanasa B'chutz. Why not? Because the Amakra here, what's the lashon of the pasuk when it says achas bashana? It says v'chiper aren al karnoisav achas bashana. That spraying the blood on the corners of the inside mizbeach is once a year. So what is this pasuk talking about when it's saying achas bashana? What it's saying is karnaisav, the mizbeach hapnimi, who the kapara achas mechaper. Ve'ena mechaper shtei kaparis. That when it comes to the inside mizbeach, so you spray the blood on the inside mizbeach only once a year and not any other time. Ha de chitzin afilu shtei kaparis. But when you talk about the soyer that's made b'chutz, that's actually not compared to this. There's no hekish. What was the hekish before? Milvad chatas akipurim, that we compared the two seirim. We compared the soyer of b'chutz to the soyer b'fnim. The thing is though, regarding this achas bashana, when it says the term achas bashana, it's not talking about the blood of the soyer itself. It's talking about the mizbeach, that you sprayed the blood on the mizbeach once a year on Yom Kippur. So there's no hekish to the soyer nasa b'chutz. So if there's no hekish, what is this part of the pasuk talking about? In the first achas b'shana here, when it says the karnaisav, in this part of the pasuk, what it's talking about is that Yom Kippur could only be mechaper on one thing. Regarding that, there's actually no hekish. So therefore, regarding Yom Kippur, Reb Shimon ben Yehuda says that the Soyer Hanasa B'chutz Yom Kippur is mechaper on three things. It's mechaper on what Rosh Chodesh is mechaper for, and what Yom Tov is mechaper for, and then also added what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. Because this achas b'shana says we're by the Soyer Hanasa B'fnim. And the Soyer Hanasa B'chutz regarding this is not compared to it. So if it's not compared, so there's no miyut of achas b'shana. So it's mechaper on three things. But the Gemara doesn't finish it off. But Rashi explains. But when you look at the second achas b'shana, where it says midam chatas akipurim achas b'shana, this achas b'shana here is coming to teach that whatever Yom Kippur is mechaper for, other Yom Tovim are not mechaper. So here, this achas b'shana, there is a hekish. It's speaking about the soir anasa b'fnim, and here from the blood of the chatas hakipurim, from this soir of the one that's b'fnim, we compare to the soir anasa b'chutz, that this also is only once a year, and the other yomim tovim are not mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. So that explains Reb Shimon ben Yehuda's opinion why this hekish sort of only goes halfway. We say that Yom Kippur can be mechaper for three things, but Yom Tov cannot be mechaper for what Yom Kippur is mechaper for. Okay, the Gemara here begins now a new subject, which eventually on the next daf, Gemara will connect it back to what we're learning here in this Mishnah, and therefore it starts with this. Sagt the Gemara, Amar Ulam Rabbi Yechanan, Ule Tot Nerei Rabbi Yechanan. Tamidin Shaloi Otzarchu Letzibor. If you have extra animals that were designated for the carbon tamid that's brought every day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon, and there's extra karbonis tamid. What says extra? So Rashi explains that the karbonis were all brought from the machzas hashekel that they had in the lishka, and then from those that monies they bought the animals that were brought for the carbon tamid. Now every year, Chodesh Nisan, the machzas hashekel that was from the previous year, they don't use it anymore. You have to use it from the machzas hashekel of the new year, as Rashi brings the pasuk here for this. Now the thing was, in the Beis Hamikdash, they always had to have. Rashi brings from the Gemara in Erechim. The Mishnah there says there was always available 6 animals every day to choose from, 2 that the carbon tamid is going to be brought from. So what happens on the last day of the year? Before the Chodesh Nisan, so you're only choosing 2 of those 6 for the carbon of the tamid of that day. So now you're going to be left with 4. There's 4 karbanis that were bought by the machzas shekel of this previous year, and now you're starting the next day, the Chodesh Nisan. So what do you do with these 4 extra animals? So he said, Rabbi Yechanan said that these tmidin, these 4 extra tmidin, shal yihotzruchu letzibor, they are not needed anymore to be used for the carbon of this year. So what are we going to do with them? Nivdin tmimim. They can be redeemed even if there's no blemish. This is a chiddush because usually when it comes to any carbon by a yachid, you could only redeem it. You have to wait until it gets a blemish. Gemara always uses the lashon yirat sheyistav. You allow it to graze until it gets a blemish. Here though, because this is by a carbon sibor, this is different. You could redeem it even without a blemish. And Rashi explains the way this is redeemed is you take money, you take chulin money, and you redeem these animals, and then that chulin money becomes now kachim. What do you do with that money that now took the place of these animals? That money now you use it for whatever the leftover machzas shekel of the previous year is used for. Rashi brings there, it was used to plate the kodesh hakadoshim. It's used for that, and then you take these animals and you buy them back. You buy them back for hektish from the money of the new year. So now it can be used for the following year. That's how it's redeemed. Okay, but as I mentioned, the main chiddush of what Rabbi Yechanan said is that it can be redeemed even though it doesn't have a mum. So Yosef Rabbi Rabbi said over this halacha that Rabbi Yechanan said. So Amalei told him, Rav Chizda told him, Man sayis lachol Rabbi Yechanan Rabbach. Who's going to listen to this halacha that you said and what Rabbi Yechanan said? Rabbi Yechanan, your teacher, said, V'chi kedusha shebehen lehechan holcha. The kedusha that there is in these animals, how could you remove it by redeeming it this way? So what he's asking is, since, as mentioned, we always say that you can only redeem kachah when it has a mum, why is this an exception? That because it's a carbon sibor, you can redeem it without a mum. The kedusha is not going to go off if it doesn't have a mum. So Rabbi says to who is he sitting in front of over here? Rav Chizda. So Rabbi says back to Rav Chizda, you do not agree to me? You can't ask such a question. Where does the kedusha go to? That over here you could remove the kedusha even if it has no mum. And he brings him a Mishnah, Masechta Shkalim, that speaks about a similar thing. But Tanan, the Mishnah there says, Meiser HaKetayres. Just like there's leftovers from the Talmud, there's also leftovers of Ketayres. Why is there leftover from Ketayres? So Rashi says, we say every day in davening that you have the 3 monem of the Ketayres that's left over from what you need for the whole year. And those 3 monem, what are they used for? For Yom Kippur. But even from those 3 monem that's used on Yom Kippur, you need the fistful that the Kohen takes and he brings into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. There's always leftovers from that. So what do you do with this leftover Ketayres from Yom Kippur? So what you do is mafrishin. The Bach takes out the word mimena. Mafrishin schar umnen. So what happens is there are those umnen, those people that were the professionals on this. She brings there from the Gemara that says that there was a family that was called Beis of Tinis. They were the ones that compounded the ketayres. So they're paid. Where are they paid from? They're paid from the funds of the Machzas HaShekel. They were paid, Rashi brings it what they were paid. They were paid 10 mana for the year. Shnei mana, that is. They were paid, 12 mana for the year. Okay, so they pay them the money for the year. And then, and then you exchange their payment for this leftover ketaitis, that they're going to get this leftover ketaitis instead of this payment. So now the money of their payment becomes chulin. And so now this leftover ketaitis is owned by the omnin. And then bischaran for their pay. And then the chayzerim mitruma chadasha. And then from the funds of the Machzas HaShekel of the following year, you buy it back. So now the leftover ketaitis was bought with the funds of the next year's Machzas HaShekel, so it can be used for the following year. Similar to what's done before regarding the carbon tumah that's left over. And Rashi says this is done with the pay of this family that was doing the work of the ketaitis. It wasn't just done in the market, with selling in the market and buying back, because this is ketaitis in the Beis HaMikdash. We don't want to take it out in the market and sell and buy back. Okay, but here you see the same thing. So the Gemara says, so Rav explains, Vamai, how do we do this? Name it, why wouldn't we say, Kedusha shebehen, the Kedusha of this ketaitis, lahechan holcha, where did this Kedusha go to? So Rashi explains, the basis of what Rav is saying is, just like regarding an animal that's a carbon, there's a Kedusha saguf, there's an actual Kedusha in the body of the animal, and therefore the Gemara is asking, how could you redeem that without a mum? It's similar regarding ketaitis. Ketaitis also has a Kedusha saguf. How does it have a Kedusha saguf? Even though this ketaitis is not necessarily placed yet into a klisharis, it's because when you use the machteshes, when you compound it, when you crush it, that is a klisharis of the Beis HaMikdash, and that's makdesha, the Kedusha saguf. And therefore the Gemara is asking, how could you redeem it? How could you redeem it and then buy it back for the next year? Amalei, sort of Chisda says, you can't prove from there at all. Ketaitis covenant, you're bringing me a raya from Ketaitis? No, Shani Ketaitis. Ketaitis is different because the Kedusha is Damamu. It does not have Kedusha in the body of its existence like the animals that we were speaking about before. The carbon tum, it has the Kedusha Sagov. But this only has a Kedusha of money. Because it's not, they weren't yet mekadosh it and a klisharis. The fact that they use a machteshes to crush it or to prepare it, that's not mekadosh it. It only has a kedusha of the value of its money value. So therefore this could be redeemed and then bought back for the next year. But the question still remains, how do you say the same applies regarding the carbon sibur of the tameh, that you could redeem it even without a mum? That's the discussion here.
What made the carbon kedusha saguf?
When it's when you makdish a behema for the mizbeach, it's kedusha saguf. When you makdish a behema for the bedek habayis, that's kedusha damim. But a behema that's you makdish for the mizbeach, automatically it becomes a kedusha saguf. That's the halacha.
You don't say that.